Okay, we are joined again with our lender partners, Ephraim and Leo with OMG Lenders, Odette Mortgage Group, to give us a bit of share their insights and home buyer tips that we can share with everyone here. We're taking it back to going back to the basics and what home buyers need to know to get into the market, the lending process, and then a little bit of an update on how we're doing in the market and recent updates. So I will turn it over to you, Ephraim and Leo, and let's have a little chat and see where we are.
That sounds great, Monica. Thanks for having us. We think that, especially for first-time home buyers or people looking to get into the market, it's really important to set the stage that in addition to being one of life's most exciting milestones, when anyone builds some significant wealth over the course of their lifetime, real estate's almost always an element of that portfolio. And we believe that some of this should have been part of core high school curriculum. It was not. And, mortgage planning really should be considered financial planning. And so some of the things in addition to, rates and products that are really important to put on a new buyer's radars, for example, going into understanding the difference between pros and cons between conforming and jumbo, talking through tax deductibility benefits and understanding the after-tax costs. So when you're comparing rent versus purchase, if you're making an apples to apples comparison, needs to be factoring in tax deductibility benefits. And then everything from credit score management and how to have your documentation ready. It's not just about having a great credit score. It's knowing how many open trade lines to have, how much credit depth and history, how best to think about prioritizing your allocation of assets as you're planning. Should you be saving for more down payment, paying off debts, saving for reserves, etc. And then, of course, the question that on everyone's mind is just current market conditions and how what's happening with mortgage rates is impacting home prices and kind of debunking some of the myths out there about what this Fed rate hike cycle is doing to mortgage rates.
Well, it's OMG, what's going on with mortgage rates?
Right.
Can we debunk the fear that every time the Feds meet and increase the Fed kind of interim money rate, that mortgage rates are going to go up? Because we've seen some changes from where we were going, right?
Very much so. And this is a big misconception. I know there's articles out there that are frankly putting out misinformation. When the Fed hikes rates, they're hiking the Fed funds rate. This is what short-term consumer debt is tied to. Mortgage rates are tied to bond prices. So conforming loans, a loan amount's tied to a Fannie Mae mortgage bond, jumbo follow the 10-year treasury. And what impacts bond prices is inflation. So the Fed is hiking the Fed funds rate with the intention of cooling inflation. And when it has the desired effect of cooling inflation, mortgage rates will actually improve. And so what we've seen over the last 6 months is, yes, inflation was going higher and then it peaked. And then the November and December CPI, which is one of the market's favorite measure of inflation, came in significantly lower than expected. And this is why we believe, and what the data shows, is that mortgage rates peaked that first week in November. They've been coming down since then. And so we're in this unique window right now where the headlines are still very much focused on rates going up. Those are not mortgage rates. That's the Fed funds rate. Mortgage rates are currently improving.
And we're kind of getting there a little bit quicker than we expected in some ways, because we did one of these updates a few months ago. I think maybe we were doing one in November, and it was right when we were at kind of the peak of where rates were at. And you were saying you kind of read some data of like how the mortgage lenders association, or some trade association for mortgage lenders, which was a big organization, was predicting that in the latter part of this year, we'd be hovering around the 5.5 range. And it feels like we've already gotten there. Like, that happened fast. Like,
yeah. You're exactly right. That November and December CPI report coming in lower than expectations really helped things quickly. Now, the January and February report, January came in at 6.5% on the CPI, which is exactly at market expectations. And then the February 14th Valentine's Day CPI report came in at 6.4%. It was kind of mixed news there from an inflation perspective. The good news was it was moving lower. it's not moving, as quick. We're not making as drastic progress month over month as we did from October, November, December. But to your point, rates came down, and you're being able to get a rate now in the high fives. Spending a point, buy it into the mid to, we've seen some of the low fives. This is really historically a good, normal, healthy place for rates to be.
Yeah, which is and kind of one of the things that we're starting to see. There is still, I think, some inventory that is, when it's not checking all the boxes, it's kind of still kind of struggling, and there's good deals to be had there for buyers. But if you get a single family in a desirable neighborhood that's kind of done, check, and there's not a lot of inventory, and people haven't had a lot of opportunity, anybody who's looking for that kind of thing, and it's getting competitive in those.
Yeah, and even though it's not quite as hyper competitive as it was, this really brings up the conversation with new buyers and explaining the difference between a pre-qualification, pre-approval, and pre-underwrite. Pre-qualification you can do online in 15 minutes. It's not worth as much. Pre-approval means we've actually run a credit report, seen tax returns, but a pre-underwrite is where an underwriter actually reviews the file and says, we've looked for anything wrong we can find with the file and can't find a single hole in it. And having that pre-underwrite in place puts you as a buyer in position to shorten or even drop a financing contingency if you want. And as we've talked about, it's not necessary to do, right? The real estate environment right now is much more pleasant to operate in. You can write an offer with contingencies, but if you find that place that checks all the boxes and another buyer comes out of the woodwork and we're putting our head together and we've got 20 minutes to decide what you want to do to strengthen your offer and talking about how do you make your offer as attractive to a seller as possible in ways other than throwing more money at them, having that pre-underwrite in place. And this is something we'll take the time with buyers to understand, is explain to them the mechanics of how to do that so that they're in a position, if they would like, to safely drop a financing contingency, which can make a big difference in writing a more attractive offer without necessarily throwing more money at it.
So kind of, since your crystal ball is pretty good, you must be shining it quite a bit there, Ephraim. You're running something, Leo, where you're getting to try get this crystal ball to be accurate, but where, like, in the interim where we're at kind of now, like as we're halfway through Q1, and we're so kind of sites are kind of moving on to Q2. What are you seeing, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I expect inflation will continue to cool slowly. This will continue to bring mortgage rates down slowly, and probably that 5.4% projection that the Mortgage Bankers Association of America predicted is probably sounding about right. And given that higher rates can put some downward pressure on home values and vice versa, this is good. It means that rates are kind of stabilizing and getting into a normal, healthy place. And the million-dollar question that everybody would love to get the answer to from their crystal ball is, when's the right time to buy? And I always think in real estate that because we never know exactly when the market will be bottom until after it's passed, if you're buying real estate in a, say, 3 to 4 or even 6 month window of the day we after the fact learn that was the bottom, that's nailing it. And I really think that years from now, looking back, as we saw this kind of COVID impact and then this little softening or normalization, that we're looking back at a really nice window right now that will prove to have been a really good time to get in, with rates kind of normalizing and coming down a bit, and able to write a really reasonable offer in a less competitive environment.
Yeah, and we can still use kind of the whole, like, the 2-1 scenario, which is, can you talk a little bit about the 2-1 and how we're using that to kind of forward think kind of how things are happening or will turn out?
Yeah, absolutely. When rates kind of first went up, everybody was talking about strategies to mitigate that. And a 2-1 buy down is one option. A second is just doing a seller credit to buy the rates down. And what we really see now is now the rates have come down a bit. If you employ a 2-1 buy down, which essentially what a 2-1 buy down is, let's say you get a 30-year fixed and the rate is 6.5%. Well, it's 2.5%, it's 2% lower in the first year and 1% lower in the second year. So you have 4.5% and then 5.5% and then 6.5% for the life of the loan. Or you can do a seller credit, where if you write the offer for $1 million, where you think that's the fair price, you write the offer for $1.020 million and put that $20,000 seller credit towards buying some points to buy the rate down. Given that the base rates are now lower, when you look at the result of that 2-1 buy down to the seller credit buy down, now you're really talking about rates that you might end up holding for long term, or maybe even the life of your time in that property. And if rates do come down and folks want to refinance, of course, we always will cover lending related closing costs for any refinance for a loan we do. And it doesn't have to be in the next 6 months or year. If somebody gets into a property now and rates come down 2 years from now, we'll cover their lending related closing costs to refinance to drop the rate.
That's great. So, you know, any fears that anybody might have about, you know, it's going to be so expensive to refinance, or it's going to be a pain in the butt, or any of that kind of stuff, you really just have to update the financials. And, you know, if you guys are able to cover those lender expenses, then it's just it's not that difficult a process
at all. And it's something we've helped many clients do. And it's a really, really good strategy. And both those 2-1 buy down and the seller credit, the numbers work out really nicely. And we can kind of show folks the difference in, let's say you had an extra, you know, one of the things that's really interesting to think about is if you had an extra $10,000 and begging the question of, should you put that towards buying points to buy the rate down, or put that towards more down payment? Well, the answer is overwhelmingly spend it on points to buy the rate down, and the savings will be about 3 to 3.5x what it would have been had you put that towards more down payment. And so this is kind of the backdrop and foundational understanding of how that seller credit can work to really put you in position to have a rate that is, I mean, rates right now are well below historical averages. And something that you might really want to hold long term, and the opportunity to get into a property in a less competitive environment. You know, it's actually a really nice time to be a buyer.
To be honest, it's a great, like, that's the nice thing about being a buyer right now is, yeah, everybody focuses, you're told to focus on kind of what the cost of the borrowing is, which, yes, you do need to have your eye on that. But, you know, how much you have to repay the bank also matters. And being able to kind of get yourself in a good position on what you're having to repay is kind of, and I almost made that mistake on buying a car recently, where I got sucked into the whole scenario of the lowest rate that they had.
Right.
And then when I kind of sat down for a second, I was like, whoa, hold on a second here. I actually get a rebate from the manufacturer of a big amount. It was like $2,000 if I take this higher rate. And when you do the numbers, if you make every payment, you end up paying the same amount of money. But if I pay it off early, I'm ahead of the game. So right. It's like, whereas, you know, you can get sucked into the lowest rate is the only way to do it. And if you're willing to kind of work the system, so to speak, and kind of benefit when you get that opportunity to get a seller to give a credit right now, and then 5 years down the line do a refi, and you guys take care of lender cost, and you know, that's working it right there.
Exactly. There's the old saying, I don't know if it's an old saying, but we like to say it, is the lowest rate in the wrong program can end up being very expensive. And sometimes, you know, when folks first get in the market, that's what they're thinking, they're just looking at the rate. And it just takes a relatively brief conversation to shine some light on the fact that there really is strategy in here. And that's why we say mortgage planning is financial planning. There's a strategy here, and the questions begin with, how long do you see yourself holding this property? What are we thinking, based on the latest and greatest data is going to happen with rates, explaining the nuances of all the different products and putting a plan in place. And that's how you do it intelligently.
So last question, and we'll wrap it up. One of the things that we saw coming into the end of last year was mortgage applications across that data point was down. Where does that data point at this moment in time, halfway through Q1, stand?
Well, as you might expect, they've increased because those rates have come down. And it was kind of a sleepy start to the year. And then things have picked up, and this is a time when prices haven't come down. Buyers who are thinking that the market was really unapproachable, well, because you had to win that beauty contest that we've talked about, and it was so hyper competitive. Well, those properties that were $1.5 million, maybe now you can get it at $1.2 million with 10% down payment, and rates have come back down a bit. We're seeing a lot of folks who are realizing, hey, this is really obtainable for us. And we love having those conversations. We feel like, of course, we work with all kinds of clients, but those new buyers and first-time home buyers, we really feel we can have a lot of impact for them in just helping them understand everything they want to have on the radar in the mortgage planning process that'll help them not only for this property, but just for the rest of their lives. If they ever end up buying future properties working with another lender, we want them to go into that process knowing more about the lending process than the lender they're working with, if it's somewhere else and they're not working with us. And so that's why they always
they'd never do that. They'd never do that. They'd be like, we gotta go
home buyers, schedule an hour with us. I know it's, and it'll be a content-rich, packed 45 minutes to an hour, and you'll walk away from that conversation feeling like a lot of this stuff is just demystified, and they know all the decisions they'll have to choose from.
That's awesome. So anybody who is that first-time home buyer and they're like, hey, I want to avail of that 45-minute consultation, where do they find you?
They can email Leo and I, and it's just our first names, Ephraim and Leo, at omglenders.com. It's omglenders.com, and you can see our names spelled there on the screen. Leo's name is easier to spell than mine, and then direct line 415-297-8514.
And of course, you're going to need an agent along to go help you. So you've got Monica and myself here. How can anybody find and get the same 45-minute to 1 hour consultation that's kind of packed, filled with all of the stuff that you need to know for the other end when you basically know about what you're going to do with the money that you can borrow? We can actually help you make a smart decision on where to place it. So where do you find us, Monica?
So future home buyers can find us at elevationrealestate.com. There's all of our information there, our blog, our social medias. Get in touch with us. We can also provide you a little bit more information that will take you that last stretch.
That last stretch. All right, rock on. So,
and Leo and I work as a team. Leo, you want to give him your direct line as well, just in case my line's died?
Absolutely. You can reach me 415-317-4523 and Leo at omglenders.com.
There you go. There's you got a lot of O's, you got a lot of vowels in your email, Leo. So, that's a good one. So the last little kind of tidbit, we'll fact check it the next time we do this. Probably end of Q1. We'll do this again. What do you think? And we'll fact check it against this one for end of Q1. What's your bold prediction?
Like where we think mortgage rates will be?
Yeah, I need I'm pushing you into a corner to make a bold prediction for the next 6 weeks.
Okay, here's one thing I can guarantee. is that the date to have in your calendar that'll give me a better idea of that is March 14th. That's the next CPI report. And, you know, I'm hoping that we see that data come down. The jobs market is really strong, which is making the Fed's fight against the inflation they help create that much tougher. And I think inflation, you know, I think, okay.
Because when people have jobs, they go out and they spend money. And when people are out spending money, it keeps inflation kind of ticking along. So it's a delicate balance.
Right. So I'm going to say, I think 30-year fixes jumbos in the mid 5s, and market activity across the board picking up in terms of just number of transactions and buyers coming out of the woodwork. And
I like it. All right. So we'll see if that crystal ball of yours is remaining accurate as we move on to the next one. So awesome. Thank you, Ephraim, Leo. It was educational and informative as always. I really appreciate it.
Honor. Thank you. Always our pleasure.
Great to see you
Thank you,
guys.
and we'll see you soon.